Dune Part 2 is finally here after delays, and boy was it worth it. The first Dune was one of my favourites of 2021 and was yet another example of why Denis Villeneuve is one of the best directors working today. However, it did suffer slightly from being only part 1 of a much bigger story. You couldn't help but feel like you were missing something. But with Dune Part 2 coming, we get the next part of this cinematic saga. If you didn't enjoy the first Dune, I'm not sure you'll love this one either. However, where many thought the first was a slow-paced movie, Dune Part 2 ramps up the action and spectacle in a huge way. The craft was on full display in Part 1, as it is here, but Part 2 we just have so much more character depth and interesting directions for them all to go, because Part 2 just builds on everything that made the first movie great. In adapting Frank Herbert's original novel, Denis Villeneuve was able to chew on more in this edition of the sci-fi saga, with this being more of like a war epic. Dune Part 2 follows on almost immediately from the last movie, with House Atreides having fallen from the Harkonnen attack, engineered by the Emperor. Paul and Lady Jessica are seeking sanctuary and hoping to follow the Fremen, who they encountered at the end of the last movie. We pick up with Paul looking to seek vengeance against those who are responsible for the death of his house and family, with many of the Fremen believing that Paul is a messiah figure. We're introduced to more of the politics, religions and cultures in Part 2, which helps flesh out the world even more. I really felt like I was being dropped into this world. One big complaint of the first Dune was that the pacing was slow. And, well, yes, Part 2 is still a slow movie. It feels far better paced. It's methodical and allows us time with the characters to see how they change, but Denis Villeneuve does a great job of mixing up and changing location and action to help the movie fly by, even with 2 hours and 40 runtime. In the first Dune movie, Paul was quite a basic character. He was a typical hero. However, in Part 2, Timothée Chalamet has more development as we see Paul go on a journey. Chalamet is great in this role. I wondered how he would adapt to this role, which requires his character to go into darker places. However, he worked well in portraying the conflict in Paul, not wanting to buy into the idea of the Fremen prophecy, and Chalamet is able to play both sides, but I was particularly impressed with how he portrayed the leader which Paul has pushed towards becoming. I was also impressed with Zendaya as Chani, a Fremen warrior who refuses to accept Paul as a Lazan Naguib, whilst also having a romance with him. This is the best I've seen Zendaya, and her chemistry with Timothée Chalamet is great. There are many other returning characters, including Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, and Javier Bardem as Stilgar, who is a standout giving some comic relief. Alongside returning cast members, we have new cast members such as Christopher Walken as the Emperor in a surprisingly subdued role, Florence Pugh as his daughter, Princess Irulan, who does well with the small amount she has to work with in this movie. However, the best of the newcomers is Austin Butler, playing a terrific, terrifying sadistic sociopath of Fade Rather. He is engrossing to watch, and you certainly won't see Elvis after this. But the real MVP of this movie is the director, Denis Villeneuve. Over the last few years, he's shown his quality as one of the best directors working today. He has such a clear control over the medium and has worked across a variety of genres. With Blade Runner 2049, he showed recently how he has the ability to take a beloved series and adapt it to suit the expectations of that movie, and he's done it again with Dune. I think truly he is not only one of the best directors currently working, but in the conversation as the best sci-fi director ever. Dune Part 2 is huge in scale. The action feels weightier, the stakes are bigger than ever. This is the big scale franchise storytelling we just haven't seen since basically Lord of the Rings, which hit cinemas over 20 years ago. Is it as good as Lord of the Rings? I don't think so. However, it is one of the first franchises where I've had the chance to even consider that it's on that level. The story looks at the political struggles, tragic romance and religious prophecies, and Denis isn't afraid to hold on silence and use images to tell his story, which makes sense after his recent comments about his focus on picture over dialogue. Every shot in here is so meticulously crafted, and he throws us into this world of Arrakis. It's such a rich world, and Villeneuve and cinematographer Greg Fraser have created a breathtaking, expansive setting which conveys the sense of beauty and danger which Arrakis has. The visuals of Dune are absolutely outstanding, and some of the best things I've seen in cinemas in years. Denis utilises close-ups to showcase the acting, but when he and Greg Fraser cut to the wide shots, they're spectacular. I mean, his eye for composition is some of the best in the industry, and he creates such beautiful images. I mean, so many have just stuck in my head for days. You don't see these sort of visuals hardly at all today. When people say they don't like CGI, they don't mean like this. The way they utilise CGI in this film is just so effective. You truly believe this world, and the fact that I can watch giant sandworms being ridden by characters and believe it fully says a lot about the visual effects in Dune Part 2. Speaking of which, there is a scene early in this movie with Paul attempting to ride a sandworm, and my god did that action scene hit. It's so well staged, the build up, the use of close-up shots mixed with wide shots, the music, and the fact that Denny holds the shots on Paul, it all works so well. And that is just one example of an action scene in this film, and there are tons of them throughout it. Scale is used throughout the movie to just create grand action scenes. Along with the beautiful shots of the desert of Arrakis, though, we see other parts of the universe, including Gedi Prime, the home of the Harkonnens. The film shoots this in like a black and white palette, and it just looks incredible. The whole film is like this, though. You could pause Dune Part 2 at any point, and you would have a wallpaper. The sound design is incredible, and no surprise to anyone, Hans Zimmer's created another score which transcends this film. It's the first score I've put on repeat, basically, since Oppenheimer. All of this is to say that sometimes a film will come along where you just sit in the cinema and you know it'll be a classic for years to come, where the film feels like it's pushing the medium forward. Dune Part 2 is one of those films. It showcases a filmmaker at the top of his game, but I don't want to downplay the whole crew involved in this. I mean, everyone is at the top of their game. They are what the industry should strive for, whether it's acting, cinematography, writing, visual effects, sound design or score. Not one component of Dune Part 2 is lacking. I think this is the film which will send Denis Villeneuve into becoming a household name. People are all currently worried about cinema, but with directors like Villeneuve, we have people still looking after it. Please go and see Dune Part 2 if you haven't, and if you have, put down in the comments what you thought about it, because we need more films like this.